The world didn't just fall apart. It left pieces behind. Pieces of people, of places, of hope. Rowan stared at the water. "You want to stay?" he asked quietly. Mara stepped closer. "I want a future." She looked at him. "But not if it costs us our freedom." Rowan finally spoke the truth he had been holding back. "Marcus won't let you leave." Mara's eyes darkened. "Then we'll make him." Haven woke to chaos the next morning. Marcus had ordered Mara to remain permanently at the medical clinic, under protection. Guards surrounded the building. She was no longer a guest. She was property. Rowan didn't hesitate. For the first time in years, he chose something other than survival. He chose her. That night, he slipped through the settlement shadows and entered the clinic through a back corridor. Mara was waiting. "You knew I'd come," he whispered. She smiled softly. "I always knew." They escaped through an old maintenance tunnel beneath the harbor. Alarms rang behind them. Gunshots echoed in the darkness. But they didn't stop running. They reached the coastline just before sunrise. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, dark and powerful beneath the fading stars. Behind them, Haven's walls rose in the distance. Marcus Vale's kingdom. Rowan collapsed onto the sand, breathing hard. Mara sat beside him. "You realize we just left the safest place left in the world?" Rowan laughed tiredly. "It wasn't safe." She tilted her head. "No?" He looked at her. "Not without you?" The sun slowly climbed above the horizon. Golden light spilled across the waves. For the first time since the collapse, the future didn't feel like an endless empty road. Mara rested her head against Rowan's shoulder. "Where do we go now?" Rowan looked at the horizon, then at her. "Anywhere." Because in a world built from ruins and decay, they had found something stronger than survival. They had found each other. And sometimes, that was enough to build a new world. The ocean was loud. After years spent wandering through silent highways and hollow cities, the endless roar of waves crashing against the shore felt almost unnatural. It filled the air with a constant motion, a restless rhythm that refused to let the world feel dead. Rowan sat on a piece of broken pier wood, half buried in the sand, staring out toward the gray horizon. The sea stretched endlessly before him, its surface shifting and folding beneath a pale morning sky. Where the water met the distance, the line between ocean and sky dissolved into a hazy blur. Behind him, gulls circled above the ruined coastline, their sharp cries carried across the wind. Life. Actual life. It felt strange. Mara approached quietly, her boots crunching softly across the sand. She carried 2 tin cups filled with boiled seawater that had been filtered through charcoal and cloth. It still tasted terrible, but it was drinkable. She handed one to Rowan. He accepted it with a tired nod, staring down at the cloudy liquid before taking a slow sip. Neither of them spoke for a moment. They didn't need to. Both of them understood the truth. They had escaped Haven. But Haven had not forgotten them. "Marcus will come after us," Rowan said finally. Mara lowered herself into the sand beside him, resting her elbows on her knees. "Probably." Her voice sounded calm, but her fingers tightened slightly around the tin cup. Rowan noticed. "Regret leaving?" he asked. Mara looked back toward the ocean. "No." A small pause passed before she added quietly, "I regret trusting him." Rowan nodded slowly. Marcus Vale was not the kind of man who tolerated defiance. He ruled Haven through control and calculation, and the people inside those walls had learned quickly that disobedience came with consequences. And Mara had become the most valuable person in Haven in less than a week. a skilled medic in a dying world, was worth more than gold. Marcus wouldn't let that go, but neither would Rowan. They moved north along the coastline over the next 3 days. The ocean gave them cover. Most travelers avoided the shore entirely. Storms could roll in without warning, turning calm water into violent walls of wind and waves that swallowed anything caught near the coast. But Rowan preferred risk to predictability. Predictable paths got people killed. The wind carried the smell of salt and rotting seaweed as they followed broken cliffs and abandoned docks. On the 3rd night, they reached the harbor, or what remained of it. Hundreds of fishing boats had once filled the docks, crowding the water with wooden hulls and tangled nets. Now most of them had sunk or collapsed into the sea. The piers had rotted into crooked skeletons, stretching out across the dark water. Rusted cranes leaned over the harbor like dead giants frozen mid-motion. But Rowan noticed something immediately. Light, faint, moving. Mara saw it too. "That's not lightning," she whispered. "No," Rowan replied. He crouched behind a rusted shipping container, watching carefully. 3 lanterns moved across the far side of the harbor. Not random, deliberate, too organized to belong to scavengers. Then a voice called out from the darkness. "You two planning to watch all night?" Rowan froze. Mara raised her rifle. Figures stepped out from behind the ruined boats. 6 of them, all armed. But their weapons remained lowered. One stepped forward, a woman in her late 30s with sun-darkened skin and short, silver-streaked hair. Her posture carried the relaxed confidence of someone used to command. "You're a long way from Haven," she said. Rowan's stomach tightened. "How do you know about Haven?" The woman gave a small, knowing smirk. "Because we're the reason Haven keeps sending patrols out here." Her name was Elena Torres. She led a group known as the Tidebreakers. They were a loose resistance network scattered along the coast. Former Haven citizens, refugees, smugglers, and anyone else who refused to live under Marcus Vale's authority. Their camp was hidden inside an abandoned shipyard several miles down the coast. Solar panels had been mounted across rusted warehouse roofs. Fishing nets hung between cranes. Small lights glowed faintly beneath patched tarps where people worked repairing engines and purifying water. It wasn't nearly as large as Haven, but it was alive. And more importantly, it was free. Elena listened quietly as Rowan and Mara explained how they had escaped. When they finished, she leaned back in a rusted metal chair and studied them both. "Well," she said calmly, "you've caused quite a problem." Mara frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Elena tapped a worn map spread across a nearby table. "Haven doubled its patrols yesterday. Marcus thinks someone is helping people escape." Rowan crossed his arms. "We didn't ask for help." Elena smiled faintly. "You didn't need to." Her eyes shifted toward Mara. Word spreads fast about a doctor. Within days, Mara became one of the Tidebreakers' most important people. Word spread quickly through the scattered coastal camps. People arrived constantly, some with infections that had been festering for months, others with broken bones that had healed incorrectly, burns, fever, wounds that never should have survived this long. Mara treated them all, from sunrise until deep into the night. Rowan watched the transformation quietly. He had seen something similar happen in Haven, but this felt different. These people weren't afraid of Mara. They trusted her, and slowly, Mara began trusting them too. One evening, Rowan found her sitting alone at the end of a pier, staring out at the dark water. Her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said. Mara glanced up at him. "I'm helping people." You're burning yourself out." She gave him a tired smile. "You sound like a nurse." Rowan sat beside her. "I sound like someone who doesn't want to lose you." The words lingered between them. Mara rested her head gently against his shoulder. "Rowan." "Yeah? I think we found something bigger than us." Rowan looked back across the shipyard. The tidebreakers repairing boats, cooking meals, laughing despite everything the world had taken from them. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think we did." 3 weeks later, Haven attacked. The warning came just after sunrise. Scout boats spotted patrol vessels approaching the harbor from the south. Fast, armed, prepared. Marcus Vale had found them. The tidebreakers erupted into motion. Barricades rose across the docks. Snipers climbed onto rusted cranes. Engines roared as small boats launched into the water. Elena handed Rowan a rifle. "You fought before?" "Enough." She nodded toward the harbor entrance. "Good. Because today we stopped running." Mara grabbed Rowan's arm before he could leave. "Be careful." He gave her a crooked smile. "I always am." She raised an eyebrow. "That's not true." Rowan sighed. "Okay. Today I'll try." The battle turned the harbor into chaos. Gunfire echoed across the water as boats collided in violent sprays of foam and smoke. Explosions shattered already ruined docks. Splintered wood and metal rained down across the waves. Rowan moved through the wreckage like a shadow, taking careful shots at Haven's soldiers advancing along the pier. The tidebreakers fought with a desperate intensity. Because this wasn't just another hiding place. This was home. And then Rowan saw something that made his blood run cold. A patrol boat sat just beyond the harbor entrance. Standing at its bow was Marcus Vale, watching, observing the chaos like a king surveying a battlefield. Marcus's eyes found Rowan across the water. And slowly, he smiled. The tidebreakers held the harbor. Barely. As darkness fell, Haven's forces retreated. But everyone understood the truth. Marcus Vale hadn't tried to win. He had only tested them. Next time he would return with more soldiers, more weapons, more firepower. That night, Rowan stood beside Mara at the edge of the harbor. Smoke drifted across the water while waves slapped against the broken docks. "You could leave," Rowan told her quietly. "Find somewhere safer." Mara turned to look at him. "Are you leaving?" "No." She smiled softly. "Then neither am I." The ocean wind carried the smell of salt and gunpowder. War was coming. But something else was growing too. Hope. Mara slipped her hand into Rowan's. "In a world that ended," she whispered, "we're still building something." Rowan squeezed her fingers gently. "Yeah. Something worth fighting for. And somewhere beyond the dark horizon." Marcus Vale began planning how to destroy it. War did not arrive quickly. It arrived slowly, like rot spreading beneath healthy wood. For nearly a month after the battle at the harbor, Haven remained silent. No patrol boats appeared on the horizon. No scouts crept along the coast. The quiet should have been comforting. Instead, it felt wrong. Everyone in the Tidebreaker settlement understood the truth. Marcus Vale had not given up. He was preparing. So they prepared too. The abandoned shipyard transformed with every passing day. Scrap metal and cargo containers were welded into defensive walls along the outer docks. Watchtowers were raised from old crane platforms, giving scouts a clear view across the ocean. Fishing nets were replaced with wire traps designed to snag enemy boats. Barricades lined the harbor entrance. People worked constantly. Some repaired engines salvaged from sunken vessels. Others reinforced the old warehouses where families now slept. Fires burned beneath cooking pots as children carried tools between workers. The tidebreakers had grown. Word of the harbor had spread across the wasteland. Runaways from Haven began arriving first. Men and women who had once lived under Marcus Vale's rule, but had finally found the courage to leave. Then came travelers from ruined cities farther inland. Families who had spent years moving from shelter to shelter, searching for somewhere that didn't belong to a tyrant. They all brought stories. Stories about Haven growing harsher, about Marcus tightening control, about soldiers being sent farther and farther into the wasteland, searching for enemies. Rowan knew what that meant. Marcus wasn't just looking for territory. He was looking for revenge. Rowan stood atop the rusted arm of an old harbor crane, scanning the horizon through cracked binoculars. Gray ocean waves rolled endlessly beneath a sky heavy with clouds. Nothing moved. No ships, no smoke, no distant engines. Yet. Rowan lowered the binoculars, but did not relax. Predators rarely attacked without patience. Below him, the harbor moved with quiet purpose. Mechanics crouched around a half-repaired patrol boat. Fishermen hauled nets from the water while arguing loudly over whose turn it was to cook. Life continued. Rowan climbed down the crane ladder slowly. At the bottom, Elena Torres waited with her arms folded. "You see anything?" she asked. Rowan shook his head. "Not yet." Elena nodded grimly. "He'll come." Rowan didn't argue. Marcus Vale didn't forget. And he certainly didn't forgive. While Rowan watched the ocean, Mara had become the heart of the settlement. The medical station, once a crumbling shipping office, had transformed into the busiest place in the harbor. Every day people lined up outside the door. Burns from faulty equipment, infections from untreated wounds, broken bones that had healed wrong months or years ago. Survival left scars on everyone. Mara moved through the crowded room with steady focus. Her dark braid hung down her back, strands falling loose as she worked. Her sleeves were rolled to her elbows, revealing thin scars along her forearms, marks left from years spent surviving the wasteland. Despite the exhaustion in her eyes, her hands never trembled. They never had. Rowan leaned in the doorway, watching her work. He had seen Mara fight raiders. He had seen her outrun storms and cross cities filled with death. But nothing impressed him more than watching her save someone's life. A young boy sat nervously on a crate as Mara wrapped a bandage around his arm. "There," she said gently. "All better." The boy sniffled. "Really?" She smiled. "Really?" Rowan felt warmth spread through his chest. In a world full of decay, Mara was proof that humanity hadn't completely disappeared. Hours later, when the final patient left, Mara collapsed into a chair. Rowan stepped inside and handed her a cup of water. "You're going to work yourself to death." She groaned. "I'm fine." "You've said that 12 times this week." She leaned her head back, closing her eyes. "People need help." Rowan crouched beside her. "They'll still need help tomorrow." She opened one tired eye. "You worry too much." He shrugged. "Someone has to." Mara reached out and took his hand. "Rowan." "Yeah?" Her voice softened. "If something happens when Marcus comes..." "No." Rowan cut her off immediately. "We're not having that conversation." She smiled faintly. "You're stubborn." "You noticed?" The attack came at dawn. A thick fog rolled across the ocean, swallowing the horizon, the kind of weather fishermen hated. Cold wind, low visibility. The water looked like a sheet of gray glass. Rowan stood on watch when he heard the engines. At first they were faint, just a distant vibration beneath the wind. Then the fog shifted, and the ships appeared. 7 patrol boats cutting through the mist. Armed, fast, deadly. Marcus Vale had brought everything he had left. Rowan grabbed the harbor alarm bell. Its harsh ringing echoed across the shipyard. Incoming! The harbor exploded into motion. Barricades slammed shut. Snipers climbed towers. Engines roared as tidebreaker boats launched into the water. Elena shouted orders across the docks. Positions! This is it. Rowan ran toward the medical station. Mara was already preparing inside. She looked up when he burst through the door. It's happening. Rowan nodded. Yeah. For a moment, neither moved. Outside, the sound of approaching engines grew louder. War was coming. Mara stepped forward and grabbed his jacket. Come back, she said softly. Rowan brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. Always do. The harbor erupted into chaos. Gunfire tore through the fog. Boats collided in violent bursts of spray and smoke. Explosions shattered ancient docks and toppled rusted cranes into the sea. The tidebreakers fought with desperate determination. This wasn't just another hiding place. This was home. Rowan moved through the battle with calm precision. His rifle cracked again and again as Haven's soldiers tried to land along the piers. A grenade exploded beneath one patrol boat, sending flames across the water. Another vessel slammed into a barricade and overturned. But Marcus Vale kept advancing, standing at the front of the largest patrol ship, watching, commanding. Eventually, Haven's soldiers reached the docks. The fight turned brutal. Close. Rowan dropped his rifle and drew his knife as a soldier lunged toward him. Steel clashed. They struggled across the slick wooden planks. Rowan slammed the man into a railing and drove the blade into his shoulder. The soldier collapsed. Another attacker rushed forward. A gunshot rang out. The man dropped instantly. Rowan turned. Elena lowered her rifle. Still alive? Rowan nodded. Barely. She smirked. Good. Then something unexpected happened. Haven's soldiers began dropping their weapons. At first only a few, then dozens. They surrendered. Marcus Vale had ruled Haven through fear. But fear only worked until people realized they weren't alone. And now they could see another way to live. Marcus realized it too late. His patrol boat tried to retreat toward the open ocean. Rowan sprinted along the pier and leapt onto the vessel as it pulled away. Marcus Vale stood waiting, pistol raised. They faced each other across the rocking deck. Marcus laughed quietly. All this for a doctor? Rowan shook his head. No. For freedom. Marcus fired. The bullet grazed Rowan's arm. Rowan charged forward. They crashed into each other. Marcus fought hard, desperate. But Rowan had spent years surviving the brutal wasteland. Marcus had spent years giving orders. The fight ended quickly. Marcus collapsed against the railing, breath ragged. The ocean roared behind him. He looked up at Rowan. You think this world will be better? Rowan didn't answer. Marcus smiled bitterly. It won't. The patrol boat drifted silently as the battle ended behind them. Weeks later, the harbor looked different. Haven's walls had fallen. People were free to choose where they lived. Some returned to rebuild Haven without Marcus. Others joined the tidebreakers. For the first time since the collapse, scattered communities began working together. Fishing boats crossed between settlements. Trade routes formed. And hope, something long buried, began to return. One evening, Rowan stood at the end of the pier, watching the sun sink into the ocean. The sky burned gold across the water. Mara approached quietly behind him. Thinking again? Rowan smiled. Dangerous habit. She stepped beside him. The harbor buzzed with life behind them, children laughing, boats returning from the sea, people rebuilding something new. We survived, Mara said softly. Rowan nodded. Yeah. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Do you think the world will ever be the same? Rowan looked out across the endless water. No. He paused, then smiled gently. But maybe it'll be better. Mara squeezed his hand. In a world of rusted cities and broken roads, love had survived. And from that fragile beginning, something new was growing. When hope becomes something real, something you can lose, do you protect it by running? Or do you stand your ground, even knowing it might cost everything?